Hello, and welcome to the Eugene Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Vince Casey. This is the first podcast devoted entirely to the Eugene real estate market, where every month we bring on local experts to discuss current trends to help us navigate the ever-changing landscape that is real estate. The Eugene Real Estate Podcast is now sponsored by House to Home Construction. House to Home Construction. Love where you live. This month we speak with Brent Cole from Triple Oaks Realty. Brent started Triple Oaks with his business partners, John Estrick and John Burke. They quickly attracted some of the top agents in Lane County and made a big splash in local real estate. Brent, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see you. And I was also excited to see that we had a Wolverine in Eugene today. Did you see that on the internet?
No, we had a Wolverine just like running down the street.
Yeah, it was over by Chambers Road. Somebody caught it on film. It was really funny. I'd never seen one that close before.
That's amazing. Do you think like someone like just released it and it was like a pet wolvie, or do you think it was like just naturally occurring on the butte?
It might have been the Michigan Wolverine trying to send us a message.
Trouble.
All right. So Brent, what encouraged you to open your own brokerage with the Johns?
Yeah, I've been in business with John Estrick since 2006, and we were at RE/MAX for 14 years. And John Burke got into real estate in 2012, and he was at RE/MAX with us, and we were really like-minded people. Eventually, our businesses just outgrew that model. And as you grow your business, you should just be doing kind of an annual audit. And at some point, it didn't make sense for us to stay underneath that franchise model anymore. And so we started Triple Oaks in 2020, right? Great time to start a business, right? When you think everything's going to crash, and then the exact opposite happens.
Right.
And our focus has always just been, we just want a collection of the highest producing, most professional brokers. We don't have a training program. We don't generally bring new people in unless they have an established business. Our average tenure for the agents that work here is 8 years. So they've already built up their sphere and their clients. And so we were really taken by surprise how many other agents in Eugene, Springfield area kind of had the same idea, but they didn't want to run the business. They just wanted to be around a collection of agents for that synergy that we're always, this is our primary source of income. This is what they do day in, day out. And it's been a real great thing. It surprised us. It was not what we naturally intended to do, but what it's turned into, we're really proud of.
Yeah, you all definitely got some of the top names over there real quick. So I know there's a lot of respect for you in the industry. I'm personally under contract with one of the Johns right now, John Estrick, and yeah, he's just the consummate professional, really knows how to run a deal, and I feel always treated really fairly, and even stole some of his vendors off his vendor list too, because he's got some great connections.
That's good. I'm sure he really appreciates that.
Well, Brent, I want to go ahead and dive right into the ruling that came out with the NAR, because I know that's what a lot of people are thinking about and talking about right now, that no longer allows buyers' agents' commissions to be posted to the MLS. Can you kind of give us a rundown on what just happened with that ruling, maybe for some of the listeners in layman's terms, so they can kind of get an idea of exactly what happened and how it's likely to affect real estate moving forward?
Sure. Yeah. And this is, April, so nothing is definite yet, but the proposed settlement from the top of the NAR down basically states that beginning on July 1st, the MLS systems cannot post what a buyer's agent is going to receive as compensation to helping their buyer purchase a property. How it has always operated in the past is that percentage has always been listed. And in 2021, the big websites that pull all their data from our MLSs, Zillow, Redfin, Realtor, whatever, they had actually started to publish that information. So even prior to 21, it was, I think some people would say it almost felt like it was a secret. Like, we don't really know what the buyer's agent is making. The listing agent, puts that number out, and whatever that number is what the buyer's agent is guaranteed to make as per the agreement with the MLS systems. They added a little bit of a level of transparency in 21 because, this lawsuit was a long time coming. It's been in the works since pre-2020. And so NAR tried to make a good faith step saying, okay, we'll just publish it for the entire consumer network to look at it. And it kind of gets buried in all that information when you're looking on, Zillow or Redfin or whatever. And now that's kind of come to a head where they're going to say, beginning July 1st, that number is just not going to be allowed to be published in an MLS system. And the way that I read through that, all that jargon, is that it's any MLS system affiliated with an association. Well, that's like 95% of every MLS system in America is affiliated with an association, either nationally, state, or local. So our main MLS system that we work out of is RMLS, Regional Multiple Listing Service. It's actually owned by 3 associations out of the Portland market. So, we're kind of just subject to all of their rules. And the agents don't have, the agents don't have anything to do with this. They're kind of subject to, we all have to adapt as well. So the way that I've been telling people that work for us and explain to my clients as well is, I'm kind of excited about it, to tell you the truth. One, because I don't have a reason not to be. I can't change it, so I might as well get excited about it. It just opens another dialogue with your clients. So if you're going to represent a buyer after July 1st, especially, is that you need to have an agreement up front that just states, these are my services, this is how I get compensated, and this is, my fee. And that fee can be different for everybody. It doesn't have to be a 3%. It doesn't have to be a 2%. It doesn't have to be a 5%. It's whatever your value point is. What I'm excited about is that as agents, we get to sit down and actually explain what our value point is moving forward. On the buyer side, buyers just assumed, well, I'm not paying you, so you must be getting money somehow. And maybe there was a conversation, oh, don't worry about it. It comes out of seller proceeds. The listing agent set what I'm going to get paid. We don't have to discuss it. Now we just get to have that conversation. And I like it because I like being transparent and just getting everything out. So there's no bumps in the road down the line. So that's what it's going to mean moving forward into this summer market, is that when you go to establish a relationship with a buyer's agent to assist you in purchasing a house, on the front end, they're just going to have a form that states, this is what I do for you, and this is how I receive my compensation. On the listing side, I'm also excited because as a listing agent, you get to sit down and say, I no longer have to put out a number to get a co-op buyer in. That buyer's agent has to establish their value with their buyer. I would still suggest it, and I think every top agent in the area acknowledges that having a buyer's agent is so important and makes every transaction smoother. So when we're sitting down with our sellers, we're going to say, this is what I work for. Here's my marketing plan. It's going to be a percentage basis. It might be a flat fee, but I doubt it. It's going to be a percentage basis. And I would encourage you still to offer a percentage basis back to a buyer's agent. I can't publish it, but when we get a buyer's agent in, I can then have that dialogue with them. It's just going to be part of the contract. It's just, we already negotiate a million things inside of a contract. This is just going to be one more, what's one more thing to negotiate or to have in the contract? It's just transparent now. And it's going to feel like the Wild West, and everyone's got a ton of clickbait out there with their own opinions. The fact of the matter is, everything's going to be fine. This is just one more small modification to how we've been doing business all these years anyway.
Yeah, I really like your take on that. I don't really have a chicken little attitude when it comes to most things in life. And this, I think once we look back at it, is probably just going to be a little blip in the radar.
Yeah, I tell people, not everyone's been in the business as, 18 years, but I'm like, you remember Dodd-Frank? That felt like it was going to end the world. And you remember when escrow had to change over to these TRID guidelines? And the consumer doesn't really know any of that stuff behind the scenes, but the people in the industry, everyone thought, this is going to change everything. How are we going to do this? Appraisals are different. And, you look at it now, it's like, everything's fine. We're all going to be fine.
Yeah.
Take a breath.
Well, thank you for that warm blanket. I'm sure some of us can use it right now. Well, speaking of buyer's agents, buying season is here. I'm in the midst of a lot of buying activity. I'm in a multiple offer situation myself right now. And with the market heating up like this, I wanted to create a guide for folks that are out house hunting to help them kind of remain competitive in this market. I'm helping a man from San Diego write an offer right now, and he's having to catch up to speed with a lot of things that we're doing to remain competitive that aren't normal in maybe a more balanced market. So for some of those buyers, I thought it'd be fun to kind of just come together and be like, hey, how would you throw together an offer if you're in multiple offer situations for, a house that's got a lot of buyers seeking it? What's the activity been like for you and the agents at Triple Oaks?
Yeah, I would say starting in beginning of April, end of March now, we're starting to see about like a 10 to 15% uptick in just activity, just transaction count coming through the door. Winter was sleepy, and over the last 5 years, when the housing market was just going bonkers, we used to tell people there's no such thing as a season anymore. Like, you used to be able to put your house on the market in November, December, and it was still going to get activity and sell by the end of the weekend. It didn't matter if it was New Year's Day, offers were going to come in. So now I really like the fact that we're moving back to a normalized market. It's not a balanced market by any means, but it's normalized, where spring is going to see this uptick. So we're going to see an increase in listing inventory, but we're also going to see an increase of buyers kind of coming out of that hibernation. And this year in particular, I think buyers have started to realize the rates are what the rates are. It costs way more money to borrow than it did, but people are going to be buying and selling constantly. So I think buyers are just like, okay, 6.5% right now, that's just what my mortgage is going to be. So moving into these multiple offers, I just looked at this last week, and in Lane County specifically, 3 out of 10 homes that had sold over the last 90 days in this first quarter had competing offers. So 30% of them. 30% of them were under list price, and 40% of them were at or around, give or take, the actual list price. So the most competitive market price in our area is going to be $450,000 and under. So our average in the area is $450,000. If you get under, there's houses out there for $350,000. So for anyone listening, and your immediate knee jerk is like, how could I ever afford $450,000? I need to buy my first house. I don't want to rent anymore, or I'm relocating in the area. There's houses that exist out there for $350,000. I showed one last week for, I think, $279,000 in Springfield. So that inventory exists. But when you go into that inventory with your buyer, right? So like you know this, you have this conversation saying, we're going to look at this, but anticipate about 5 or 6 offers on the table. Like if this house is listed at 279, 315, 350, there's going to be a scramble to pick up this price point. And so the advice is, unfortunately, we can't think about this. If I'm going to show you on Thursday, I guarantee you that listing agent's going to tell me they're reviewing offers Saturday at 5. Like I'm sorry you have a short window to think about this, but you do. And let's get pre-approved on the front end, right? Just raise your hand. Every realtor knows this. This is the advice, is if you're looking at a price point of $350,000 and you're tapped out, you're not going to be able to escalate up to $350,000. So I'm sorry about that. But if you're looking at $350,000 and your lender says, hey, if you wanted to or could, you could get to $400,000. Okay, great. We got a little bit of breathing room, because unfortunately we're going to be paying over list price to get these. So these are really great conversations to be having, and really great just knowledge for the buyer to understand that on our competitive price point, they probably going to have to step up and just either give a few more dollars in, or give up maybe some of their negotiation power on the front end.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you're helping a buyer try to land a property that has multiple offers on it, and let's assume that it's priced right and it's in a great location. What would you tell your buyers to get this under contract?
Yeah, so first step is what we just talked about. I know it's listed at X, but we're probably going to have to go above. So there's a couple automatic techniques in here that every buyer's agent will throw out. That is, number one, I think, is escalation clauses. And so for anyone unfamiliar with the escalation clause, it is saying, again, I'm going to pick a round number, $360,000. Buyer will pay $360,000 or pay $2,500 more than any competing offer up to $375,000 or whatever that is, right? That's just the dialogue. But what that clause is saying, okay, if we're going to get 4 offers in, the seller's going to look at them and say, okay, well, buyer A is willing to pay $360, buyer B is willing to pay up to $370, buyer C is willing to pay $2,500 up to $375. Great, let's send a counter offer back to buyer C saying, you can buy it, but the price is going to be $372.5 instead of $360. So that's one way to make it competitive. Let's talk about the cons of doing that.
Sure.
Is the buyer could say, Brent, I can only afford X dollars, so I can only go so high. Or this really feels like I'm overpaying for this house. Or it feels a little manipulative, like they put it out at this number and now I have to pay more, right? I can't change those market dynamics. That's just what I'm trying to help navigate through. But I completely empathize with the first-time home buyer who's in a market like this. And then I would say what I've seen a couple times is agents go overboard. Like they won't put a cap on it. And then they'll send back and be like, all right, well, you said you'd pay $415,000. And then, then that buyer's agent or buyer being like, oh, sorry, I was just trying to win. I wasn't really serious about paying that much money. I just wanted to beat everybody. Like, okay, well, there should have been a little better coaching. And when people start getting amped up about, you got to buy a house, and sometimes it can get out of control.
Right. And I think there are some sellers out there that are a little miffed by those as well. Like if somebody writes an offer at $350 and somebody else says, hey, I'm willing to go up to $355, sometimes they'll just take the person that was more straightforward with them instead of they think maybe it's a little gimmicky to write an escalation clause. But at the end of the day, I think most sellers just want the highest and best along with whatever else they might be looking for, a rent back or whatnot.
Sure, and there's other terms inside there, right, it's not just always price. There's other terms that inside any offer that a seller may appreciate more than just a couple more bucks.
Yeah, and it definitely protects you a little bit to say final price to be determined by an addendum or a counter as well. So have you ever waived inspections to get under contract?
Yeah, waiving inspections is a tricky one. I will say short answer is yes. Have I done it? Yes, because during the hyper market, we had to, and certain buyers understood the risks. In today's market, my advice would be, you don't need to waive inspections. Write in there that you will get your inspections and they're going to be for your purposes only. But the difference between waiving inspections and just getting them and telling the seller on the front end, I understand it's competitive. I'm not going to hit you for repairs, but I need to protect my own interest and understand what's going on. It's not just in the house, it's under the house, it's the attic, it's the roof, it's the things you don't see. And the things you especially don't see in that short 30-minute window that you saw it once and then you had to rush to try to get it under contract. So at this point, I wouldn't recommend anymore telling any buyer, waive your inspections. And I'll say this from the principal broker side, where I manage 50 other agents, is and being close to other principal brokers in this town and having these candid conversations, is the biggest problems that are going to be arising now and over the next couple of years still are these buyers that purchased and waived those inspections and then moved in and found a really huge problem. And now we're going to come back not only to try to capture any type of, whether it's litigation or complaints against the seller's disclosure or their representation, That's going to happen a lot, and it's just starting to peak now after these buyers waived all these inspections, and unfortunately, there's a conversation in there that said, well, I feel like we tried to cancel you not to like waive all your rights here,
Right.
And now all of a sudden, so long answer is, yeah, don't waive them. Just write it in there. We'll review them, but if there's a gross amount of repairs, I still have the right to negotiate with you. That's part of the contract. If you don't want to negotiate, that's fine. I might be out the cost of the inspection, but that's the price you pay for protecting your interests.
Yeah, one of my little tricks that I like to do is, if the buyer is really serious and motivated, is just go ahead and get that inspection done before they make their final decision on which contract they're going to come under.
Yeah.
And that's been a good way to tackle that one too. All right. Let's talk a little bit about appraisal waivers. Do you usually include that? Or do you, whenever you use an appraisal waiver, do you do up to a certain point, or is that one of your ammunition tactics, or do you not like those?
Yeah.
Trying to read the look on your face here.
I love that. This is, again, during the hyper market, we saw it happen.
Right.
And I think if you talk to anyone in our industry, in our market here, everyone's got that one story that says, hey, I waived appraisal and the appraisal came in $50,000 under. And I had to overbid to get it. And I gave up the right of protecting myself by appraised value. It came way under. Now what's going to happen is that the buyer's going to say, some buyers said at price points, we're like, yeah, great. I got another 50,000 I'll throw in. Right? If you're already in that price point, I'm not worried about you because you're already economically, you can afford what you need to afford. I'm not worried about that. But for the majority of price points, is that created a problem. So same thing, I would say, I don't want to, when I'm representing you as a buyer, I don't want to give up rights that you have. And one of those rights is you are, if you're getting a loan, you're bound to that appraised price for better or for worse. Now, I don't mind writing them saying, okay, we'll do an appraisal waiver up to $10,000, $5,000, but like cap it again. Because if you leave it uncapped, you're leaving these open-ended contingencies, which is not helping. It's not helping your best interests by any means. So it might be a way to like try to get the seller to take you again. But again, we're not in a hyper market. We're just in a very competitive market where I would say and advise to anybody, don't give up the rights unless you need to. And if you're getting pushed to give up your rights, take a very good look at the what if on the other end of it.
Yeah, I would never push somebody to do that. What I like to do is have a really candid conversation with the listing agent. And I'm like, hey, do you have any cash? And if they're like, yeah, we got two cash offers, then I will have that conversation with my buyer and say, okay, they have cash on the table, which cash is king, but if we're coming in higher and we can offer them an appraisal waiver, then we are cash or cash-like, but you're just waiting maybe 2 or 3 weeks longer to close with us. So I just have that candid conversation, and yeah, most of the time we're going to pick a cap, sometimes 10 if it's the right buyer and they are cash heavy, maybe 20. But yeah, that's definitely a way to compete with those cash offers if you are still using a loan.
Right.
But I think you nailed it on the head as far as when to use those and how to use them. So what are some of the negotiating tactics that you've seen that work well besides those three that we just mentioned?
Yeah. So, some other items that you have control over with assistance from whatever team is helping you is closing timeline, right? So some lenders, and depending on if you've got a large down payment, if you've already worked closely with the lender, they might be able to escalate your closing time. 20 days closing. I mean, we've seen, I think the shortest closing time, I want to say it's like 19 days so far this year. And so there's some lenders out there that lend out a portfolio in-house that can get it, they don't have to wait to broker that money. It takes 30 days, get it in. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of cogs moving in the lending world. But some of those lenders that say, great, we can guarantee you close in 20 days. So that really helps you compete against those cash offers. The other things to control, obviously, we talked about inspections, we talked about appraisal. Price is always going to be the deciding factor, the other thing that sellers are going to look at is, in this type of market, we have a lot of sellers that are transplanting elsewhere. So can I offer you occupancy back? I can close fast, and Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I can get you your equity out of this, that you're going to maybe move into a different property or purchase whatever, but I can also allow you to live in this house. And there's a negotiation in there, the occupancy after closing. Maybe the seller pays you rent, maybe you don't, maybe it's all part of the package price. Hey, you get an extra 14 days. I've got one right now where we're giving the seller an extra 5 days, just free rent. They have to carry an insurance policy to, again, protect against the liability of them being there. But I think that has become a really strong negotiating point for buyers, because the sellers, hey, we're all human. Let's make sure we're human about this process. Is sellers need to go somewhere. Let me allow you that time to get your stuff moved in or out, and off to your next location.
Yeah, that's great. And I definitely think that lenders are a really big part of this process. It's one of the hardest conversations I have with new buyers, that they have their little pre-approval letter in hand from Rocket Mortgage and they think they found a great deal, or maybe they're dealing with big bank or whatnot. And it's just like, you know what, you're really going to improve your chances, especially in a multiple offer situation, to get somebody that's local and somebody that's trusted.
Let's never, ever underestimate the power of working with local people. That is the best negotiation tactic you have, is having a good local buyer agent that knows your best interests to go out and get what you want. There's hands down that's the best thing any buyer could do.
Yep, I fully agree. So now that we know what to do, what do we not want to do? What are some of the worst negotiating tactics that you've seen?
Yeah, without name dropping in town.
No, please use the names.
Yes, but we can spill the tea on all kinds of people around this place.
I get it.
The open-ended contingencies, I think, are the worst. There's been multiple times where I've seen people just come in just over and above the realm of realism on their numbers. It's listed at 400,000. I'm going to offer you 515,000, and even if it's cash, just for the sake to win, because their strategy is to tie up the contract and then come back and negotiate you once you're in contract, and it rarely works. And again, maybe just touch on the fact of having good representation. I'll say there's a local escrow agent here just recently, within the last month or so, that advised one of her friends to not use a buyer's agent, use the buyer's agent to view the property, and then go directly to the listing agent to write the offer and ask for a 2.5% discount on it. Guess what? That contract didn't stay together because the buyer didn't know how to negotiate timelines, vendors, and all the intricacies inside of that. And so a really poor negotiation tactic is actually just not going in knowing what you're doing. That wastes everyone's time, and quite frankly, one, ruins relationships, but then also the fact that there's just a lot of expectations for buyers and sellers, and then there's just a ton of drama that just gets built out of those situations. So poor negotiating is honestly just poor representation, if any.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even those bulldog agents that claim they're really tough negotiators, it's like once you've been under contract with them as a listing agent, you never want to use them as the buying side again. So how much are they helping themselves in the long run get new clients under contract?
Well, this is good too. Like using people is locally experienced agents. We all have what I call political equity with each other in our relationships. So I know there are certain agents that have that bulldog mentality and they have to win, but recognizing the fact that they have to win actually helps me realize that, okay, I'm just going to give you an Easter egg. I'm going to give you a little milk bone on this to make sure you feel like you're coming out on top, just because I know your personality, because I worked with you for so many years. I mean, that's the value of using people who are really experienced, is that, we actually have personal relationship with each other. And so when I call you, Vince, and I want to present an offer for a buyer, you can be like, oh, Brent, I haven't talked to you for a little while. How you doing? We can have a small chat, but then also realize that we're going to work well together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's got to be a cohesion factor, and you have to be able to meet people at a lot of different levels because, we're a broad community. We come from a lot of different backgrounds, and I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Well, what would you say to those buyers that are kind of on the fence right now? Maybe they're paying like $2,500, $2,800 in rent, and they have that dream of owning a home, and they're kind of waiting for the right time to jump back into the market. Maybe they lost their pre-approval when rates skyrocketed. What kind of advice are you giving those folks right now?
Sure. Even though it feels like the market is too high to purchase, the fact of the matter is the rental market in Eugene, Springfield has increased exponentially following the price of housing. So if you are renting an apartment or a house or a duplex, wherever, and you're paying into the 2000s, the fact is you can still buy a house for a very similar mortgage, if not maybe a little bit more, but have home ownership. It's just not going to be in the same location. And so what I try to tell everyone is you're not buying your forever house. You're going to buy a nice little 2-bedroom bungalow, but it might be on the outskirts of town. It might be in a different area. You can get 0% financing through USDA. There's local credit unions that offer it. It's more important if you want to be a homeowner, I would say it's more important to achieve that goal and maybe give up your location basis right now, because the market is not going to crash. That's just the fact of the matter is, for a while now, as long as we're in a shortage of supply, which God love the city of Eugene, they're not making more dirt, and they're definitely not helping people build more houses. So we're always going to have a shortage for another decade plus in front of us. That's going to show up prices. Buy your first house. Buy it in a location that you didn't want to necessarily be in forever, but you're going to be there for 3 years. But now you've got your foot in the door, and you're buying a house at $300,000. Anticipate we're always going to be looking at a 3 to 5% appreciation rate on the low end. If we see a stagnant appreciation rate, there's probably something major, globally economic speaking, happening, but it's not going to be a forever thing, right? So now you're taking that $300,000 asset, 5% every year. We're building. That's how you build that equity. Great, we've improved it, and then let's start maybe building a nest egg to move towards that location that we want to be in. But I think that's just how this needs to happen. Is we have to just start expanding out. Like, okay, I got some short-term, but at least I got my foot in the door.
Yeah, I heard a phrase the other week that I'm going to steal. You can marry the house, but you only date the rate. I know that I do want to let people know when you do refinance, you still have closing costs. So it's not as easy as just walking in and swapping out some paperwork.
Right.
You're still looking at closing costs, but there is, I believe, going to be, and there's going to be variables in the rates and whatnot. So there will be a time that I think people can refinance. Now, whether it works for you and your pocketbook, that's going to be a choice between you and your family and your lender, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So I know that you also cross over into commercial real estate. What is the commercial real estate market in Eugene like right now?
Yeah, I got into commercial real estate a little bit more than 10 years ago. And my main focus was I wanted to be able to offer a bridge between the residential world and the commercial world. And I wanted to, they speak two different languages. So you have to be bilingual a little bit. There's a couple similarities, but for the most part, they operate differently. The lending market operates differently. The depreciation schedules operate differently. And there's a lot of different stuff in it. The commercial market, office space has been hit hard. Go figure. Ever since 2020,
Right.
the small office space has not been hit nearly as hard as the large office space. So those large office buildings, you think of stuff on Executive Parkway over by Valley River Center. Some of those stuff, just those vacancy rates went through the roof, and they're going to stay high. That's just. That I think that market is still trying to figure out what businesses are still going to come back to day to day in real life. And I'm not sure what that looks like. The industrial market space has always been strong, will continue to be strong, has been strong for a while. The medical space has been strong. If you're employed in Eugene specifically, you are either working in education, medical, or city employee. if you're not one of those three, then you're probably working for a small business or you own a small business. I mean, that's the truth. So that's what runs our commercial markets are those three big things. So it's been interesting. I've got a lot of commercial clients that want less than 5,000 square feet. They want to run their clinics, their counselors, their therapists, physical therapists, and we can't find it. And if we do find it, it's $600,000 for, a converted house in the commercial district of downtown Eugene, something that's cute. They want to run the business out of, but it's limited. So the commercial market is just as limited with inventory as the residential market is right now.
Gotcha. So are there like investment strategies that you can take into the commercial realm? Are they just as prevalent as the ones on the residential side, or maybe even more so?
Yeah, investing in commercial real estate is, you almost have to pick your flavor here. So the easiest crossover between residential investment and commercial investment, I would say, is small apartment complexes, like a garden high rise, like less than 12 units. You can maybe then work your way into these bigger ones. But it's kind of like we say, like residential is residential, right? You could sell a duplex or you could sell a 12-plex. And for the most part, you're going to do your calculations the same. What are my rents? The slang on that side would be like, what's my rent per bed? What do the beds cost me? What do the doors cost me? So that's kind of an easy, kind of maybe apples to apples comparison between residential and commercial investment. The other aspects of commercial investment, you start getting into big spaces. So like industrial generally works off of a triple net lease. And a triple net would be, okay, I'm going to place a tenant. They're going to pay me a base rate. They're going to pay my property taxes. They're going to pay my property insurance, and they're going to pay the CAM, the common area maintenance, which might be like parking lot maintenance, lighting, joint meters, things like that. So investors on that side, like retail and industrial that work under that, they just look at what are my vacancies and how long are my leases. These leases are 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. They have options to extend. So it's a lot more spreadsheet investment than it is, I think, like I want to own some duplexes and tell my friends, hey, check out this neighborhood. I own one of these properties, right? And the other side, we were like commercial, it's like, you're owning like retail centers. I don't necessarily care so much who the tenants are. I care what their pro forma is. And so I think it's a lot more on the commercial side, just a lot more business. It's just numbers. That's all it is. And we got to see what the performance of these are. And there's just so many different types of leases and tenants. I talked to a guy 2 weeks ago. He owns a Rite Aid, right? So he's buying these Rite Aid buildings. And he calls me because Rite Aid, national tenant, obviously, he buys it 3 months later, they terminate their lease. And so this guy, he was buying like a $2.3 million building. He thought it was secured for 7 years. Why would Rite Aid leave? Well, it was in one of our little sub-communities outside of, Eugene, Springfield. And Rite Aid nationally was just like, hey, we can't have a spot in here anymore. It's not profitable for us. We're going to break our lease. One check out the door. And now he's like, how am I going to rent a Rite Aid building? It's not like you just pick any tenant to put in Rite Aid. A Rite Aid building looks very specifically like a Rite Aid building. And so the risk factor on the commercial side is also just a different bag on that bigger scale stuff. But, for the most part in our market, small businesses, I love small businesses. I love small business owners, and trying to find that connection to fill these very unique local spots around town. Whether either from the investment standpoint, you're going to place a tenant, or if you're the business owner. I mean, that's what I really love, because it's real community based.
Yeah. Well, I think I might keep the commercial talk to a minimum, because I'm going to have a specific episode on commercial real estate here in the summer. So
that's great.
Yeah, but thanks for that insight. And I know we've covered a lot of topics today. Is there anything that's kind of burning a hole in your pocket that our listeners need to hear?
I don't think so, other than, like I said, there's going to be a lot of clickbait out there about changes on representation and all that in the next 90 days and through the rest of this year. But, my take on it is it's just business as usual. Find yourself a realtor that has a good value, explains their value to you, And other than that, people need to buy and sell every day. It's just a normal aspect of life, and everything's going to be fine. Just keep on moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like, we're probably going to pivot to where we write in our commission into the contract somehow, or maybe on the buying side at some point, there might be a mortgage company that creates a program to have a buyer's agent commission worked into the loan, but I'm not really concerned about commissions going away.
Commissions aren't going to go away. People still want good representation. They have jobs. They're not going to look at Zillow at 9 o'clock at night and think that they can do it on their own. They got to wake up, take care of their family. Real estate agents are always going to be around.
Yeah, I trust me, nobody wants to do what we do except for the people doing it.
We're all crazy for the right reason, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's definitely great insight. We had a great conversation today. If anybody wants to get a hold of you and talk more about real estate, what's the best way to reach out?
TripleOaksRealty.com. You can find me or any of the other 50 brokers on our website. Just head there and click on through.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Triple Oaks is you, John, and John?
And 47 other amazing brokers that work here.
Yeah. Is that where the triple came from?
Oh, yeah. Like, where did the triple come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, great story. I'll keep it to the short version.
Sure.
Is the three of us, we sat down. John Burke had already kind of had this Triple Oaks concept, and we threw out a ton of different names. And I wish I'm sure I wrote them down because it'd be great to go back and read. Like, we were like, throw out the stupidest names and then try to throw out the most sophisticated names, and let's just see what's going to happen. And I wish I could remember the stupidest ones because they were great. And the logos were great too. Just like, this is the most atrocious idea ever. And then finally, we came back to, like, you know what, Triple Oaks seems the best. I don't know. I wish there was a more magical story other than being like, yeah, we just talked about it for a few days and we're like, well, let's just stick with Triple Oaks.
Yeah, no, it definitely has a very professional kind of appearance to it, and everybody that I've worked with out of Triple Oaks definitely knows what they're doing. It's always a breath of fresh air to get under contract with you guys. So, anywho, that's our show today, folks. I'd like to thank Brent for coming out today. I'd like to thank our sponsor, House to Home Construction. I'd like to thank Patty Rhodes for producing the show, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening. Next month, we bring legendary real estate agent Barbara West out of retirement to talk about listing presentation. Good night, and we'll see you next time. Boom.
If you have a question for the show, feel free to email us at eugenerealestatepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to work with Vince Casey as a buyer or seller, please email him at vincecaseyrealestate@gmail.com. Be sure to mention this podcast with House to Home Construction to receive up to $500 off any roof bid from a competitor in writing.
Boom.